Hello and welcome. My name is Danielle Dinkelman, and I am really excited to share with you ACW Coaching's workshop on breaking the burnout cycle. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and we are going to dive real deep today, hoping you will walk away with some real solutions for a healthier workplace. Whether you lead an organization or you are working inside of an organization that you wish could do a little better, organizationally or individually, I really hope that you will have some solid takeaways today on preventing the burnout cycle. So, so, the topic of burnout is near and dear to my heart because it's been a big part of our lives. This is my family, my lovely husband, and my four kiddos. And in 12 years, I watched my husband hit the burnout wall four times. It was not fun, and it really made a huge impact on our family because we continually found ourselves at a crossroads. And maybe you have experienced this crossroads before, but it's that moment where you have to decide between your livelihood and your well being. And that's the place we found ourselves multiple times for my husband. And it is because of that experience, actually, that we created the company that we created, ACW, or Advanced Corporate Wellness. We really just feel like there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way for human beings to exist inside of organizations without getting to that crossroads where work and wellness just can't coexist. We are really, really interested in providing individual wellness coaching services in an effort to help folks see where work and well-being can be a symbiotic relationship where they can fit together and everyone can thrive. So let's dive into how do we break the burnout cycle. It is a cycle, and maybe you've experienced it before. The World Health Organization lists these burnout symptoms. We can recognize this in ourselves. We can also recognize it in our coworkers. We can recognize it in our family members. When you start to feel or notice that just depleted energy, you're starting to distance yourself from the work. You're starting to distance yourself from the people in your workplace. And maybe you're just feeling a lot of friction and challenges in just getting the daily tasks completed. Just getting through the day feels painful. When you are experiencing or noticing these things, you're you're coming into burnout. Welcome. I I I don't envy you. I've been there. My husband's been there. Maybe you've been there too. So how do we get ourselves to stop going there? How can we prevent this from happening again and again and again? A great definition of burnout is this state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. And it's caused by this excessive and prolonged stress. And I love this definition because in this definition is the recipe for prevention. So let me tell you what I mean by this. First of all, let's look at this from kind of a cycle standpoint. If you're experiencing burnout right now, you're experiencing those symptoms we just talked about, you're probably starting to hit that wall, and there's just going to be this breaking point, right? Where you're just like, something's got to give. I need to go into recovery, right? So you go on a massive vacation, or you take a sabbatical, or you quit your job. Something has to change for you to be able to create space for yourself to recover, right? In that recovery, it works. It's amazing. Wow, feeling so much better, feeling like myself again. I have my full mental capacity back. Maybe you've found your energy and your motivation and your passion again. And I call that the honeymoon phase, where like everything seems better, everything seems great. But then if and when you do re-engage with work, that onset of stress is going to be inevitable, right? Then it builds and it builds and it builds, and we're right back to chronic stress. It's chronic. We're just always buried. We're always pushing this boulder uphill, and eventually we will hit that burnout wall again. We will hit that breaking point where our brains, our bodies, our spirits are just screaming at us, and we have to walk away again, whether that means a big vacation, leaving a job, making some sort of big drastic change. This is the cycle. And maybe you see yourself in this a little bit. Maybe you're in one of these stages right now. And I want to tell you there is a way to break this cycle. I've discovered it for myself. We've discovered it for our clients. And I'm happy to say my husband has gotten out of this cycle as well. So, how do we do it? I love this quote from Adam Borland over at the Cleveland Clinic. He says, "It comes down to establishing a meaningful daily routine. It's about creating and maintaining boundaries so you can attend to your health and well being while also attending to the responsibilities of your job and your personal life." Right? So here's that symbiotic relationship. There is a way, there has to be a way to let there be space for the work, the job, the career, and space for you as a human being to tend to your health and wellness. So, how do we do that? How do we find that? Breaking it down into these two pieces that Adam said. Number one, tending to that emotional, physical, and mental health. And then I would add, if we're dealing with chronic stress, if chronic stress is part of burnout, how do we get out of chronic stress? We recover. Okay. That's how we break the cycle. When you experience heightened stress, you have to recover from the heightened stress. Okay. So for today, I'm going to dive in mainly to tending to our emotional and physical health. But there's so much here that we could dive into. This is just an intro to these ideas. And I hope that you have some light bulb moments today. So how do we do it? How do we tend to our well-being and our work? How do we make space for both of these things? I'm going to share 3 tips with you today. Number 1, we're going to talk about pacing ourselves. The second one, we're going to talk about taking care of ourselves. And the third one, we're going to talk about advocating for ourselves. All right. So, how do we pace ourselves? How do we know when it's time to take a break? How do we know when it's time to rest? I think so many of us are actually trained and conditioned to push past this point of diminishing returns, as Greg McKeown talks about in his book Effortless. It's this wall where if we continue spending time exerting energy on whatever work or project we are engaged in, there comes a point where we would be better off if we would take a break and come back to it fresh, and we would be able to have better results, better input, better output. Okay. It's that wall that we need to get more acquainted with of when we are pushing past that. So start noticing that moment when you realize if I stepped away right now, it would actually be in service of the result that I'm hoping for. So do not push past that resting point, or you are falling into this law of diminishing returns. Another great concept that Greg McKeown talks about in this, he talks about it in his book Effortless, but he also talks about it in this article in Harvard Business Review, is the 85% rule. This is another just rule of thumb. It's not exact. It's a great way to be mindful of the pace that you're choosing when you're engaging with work. And it's really this idea of, if you were to go run a marathon, you're not going to run that at your sprinting pace, right? You're going to pace yourself such that you can complete the entire marathon, right? When we're talking about work, in order to accomplish maximum output, you actually need to refrain from giving maximum effort. And those type A's, high achievers in the room, are going, what? No, this is my whole identity, is to be the overachiever, to be the high performer, to be the top producer. And I would ask, how sustainable is that? If you are giving 100% of the time, how sustainable is that? And if you've experienced burnout before, you can probably answer, not very sustainable. It doesn't work. We can't do it. We're human beings. We're not machines. And there is variation to our capacity from day to day. And we've got to start tuning into what that is. What do I have to give today? Give what you can. and leave some fuel in the tank for yourself, right? This is a tiny step that we could start to take that would really help break that burnout cycle for ourselves. So that's pacing ourselves. Let's go on to taking care of ourselves. I want you to do a little personal check-in here. Check in with your current lifestyle. Does your life look like this? Does work just completely consume and overwhelm all other aspects of your life right now? If it does, that's okay. Let's have some compassion about that. This isn't about judging anything, but it's about observing and noticing. Yeah, how much space do I have for rest? How much space do I have for play, for connection, for purpose, for nourishing my body, my mind, my spirit? Where do these things fit for you? How big would each of these circles be if they were all proportional to your current lifestyle? Sometimes this is mm, something that we get into because of circumstance, and we can kind of get into a place where we're reacting. We're not proactively creating this lifestyle, we're just reacting. This is just kind of where it has ended up. So I'd encourage you to just take note of where you're at with that. And really, the key to all of this burnout prevention is self awareness. And that is really why our company provides what we provide in the form of individual wellness coaching, because what's needed for you to break your burnout cycle is going to be different than the next person and the next person. So, a good wellness coach can help you increase your self awareness, but you can do this for yourself too. It's harder, but you can do it. And you can start cluing in. You can start pausing. You can start having some check ins with yourself. Have some check ins with people that are close to you and start getting some answers to these questions around what do you need? What do you need to thrive? What do you need to feel happy, satisfied? What do you want? What do you wish you had a little bit more space for? One coaching question that I've asked before is, what did you used to do that you don't do anymore? And that kind of makes you sad. Or um, what's a hobby that you've always wanted to try, but never felt like you had the time or money or opportunity? These types of questions, when we slow down enough to ask them, give us a tiny window into what we want and what we need. And when we give ourselves those things, it's amazing the difference that it can make in just helping you feel alive again. So maybe you could start to shift the balance a little bit. Maybe you could turn the volume down by working on that 85% rule we talked about. Turn the volume down on work just enough to make space for living a full life. Where do you want to invest a little more time and energy so that it can give back to you in connection, rest, play, nourishment, purpose? Where do you want to see that come back to you? My recommendation would be to start small. Okay, don't overwhelm yourself. Don't try to make it perfect overnight. This is not going to happen quickly, but it can really start to shift when you find little tiny tweaks in your routines. Taking a 5-minute walk during your lunch break, um, actually taking a lunch break away from your desk, signing off to make space for these things, signing off at 5 o'clock, signing off at 6 o'clock, whatever that looks like for you. Take those small steps and see what you can start to create proactively, intentionally. Start living on purpose a little bit. And I know that sometimes this doesn't always feel possible. And that's where the organizational side comes in. Maybe the nature of your job doesn't allow for this, but I invite you to be creative and I invite you to stay curious and to never dismiss a little prompting, a little idea of something that would be meaningful to you that would go a long way. Small things can go a long, long way when they're meaningful things. What's a small shift, small routine that would just feel so nourishing to you? All right, coming back to these three tips, we've talked about pacing ourselves, we've talked about taking care of ourselves, kind of rebalancing where work and the rest of life fits together. Let's talk about advocating for ourselves. And what do I mean by that? Yep, I'm talking about boundaries. Not everybody likes this conversation because not many people like to say no. And that's what boundaries are all about. It's about saying no appropriately and identifying and communicating what you are and are not available for. And that's hard to do at work because maybe you feel like, this is my livelihood. Like I have to say yes to everything or my job is on the line. I hope that you are not in a culture where that feels true, but sometimes we are. Sometimes that is the reality. So, how do you navigate that? How can you set boundaries for yourself? First of all, you're probably already setting some boundaries. And I would invite you to make a list of the boundaries that you have right now. Do you have a boundary around how and when you take your lunch break? Do you have boundaries around when you respond to emails and Slack and Teams messages? And then I want you to make another list. What if you had a wish list for the boundaries you would like to have? This is where we can often identify when we are kind of being the victim, honestly, where the boundaries we wish we could have, um, they're on the wish list because we feel like there's some circumstance in place that makes that impossible. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes it's in our imagination. So I invite you to make that wish list and then challenge yourself to pick one thing on that wish list that you could start creating routines and boundaries around. What this does is it creates space. It creates space for you to live a full life. And if we have those boundaries, then we don't overcommit, overperform, and put ourselves right into that chronic stress piece that we talked about with the burnout cycle. And I'll leave you with this last idea around self-advocacy and boundary setting. This fact that maybe you've heard before, that we are constantly training others how to treat us. If you are the yes person, if you're the go-to person, you've trained people to see you that way, just like we train our pets. I love training dogs. It's kind of a little side hobby of mine. I've trained two different dogs for our family over the years, and it is amazing to see how consistent action can really train behavior and response in these beautiful animals. And I hate to say it, but humans aren't much different. We train each other how to treat us. Okay. So be mindful of that in your responses, in your behavior. How are you training others to treat you in the workplace? And that alone could help you create a lot of space for yourself. So, again, if you want to break your burnout cycle, you've got to start pacing yourself, you've got to start taking care of yourself, and you've got to start advocating for yourself. So, this is all for that individual inside of an organization. If you are a leader, I want you to ask yourself, is there space in your culture for people to do this? Or are there cultural norms that warn people against these things? And maybe you reward people for the opposite of these things. These are things that leaders really need to be mindful of if they want to retain their people and if they want to engage their people. Okay. So we're going to wrap up here. I want to give you a tool that you can get started on this for yourself. This is breaking our burnout cycle is a very personal journey. And again, that's going to start with self-awareness. In our coaching program, we use a tool called the Wellness Wheel, and it's a series of 36 questions in these 6 different areas of well-being. And if you scan this QR code, you'll go straight to this document. I'm not going to ask you to give us your email or anything. I just really, truly want you to use this tool. I want you to print it out, fill it out, and then take a look. Take a look at where you are right now. This is going to give you a quick snapshot of this moment in time, what habits you have in each of these areas that are supporting you. You might see areas colored in that surprise you. You might see areas that are blank that worry you. Either way, I want you to engage with this. And if you enjoy it, feel free to reach out. Let me know how it went. Everything you share with me, of course, will stay confidential. And I would love to just know that you give this a try and that it serves you in some way. From there, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on over email. And if you're curious about our employee wellness coaching services for yourself, for your teams, you can reach out to us at acwcoaching.com. Take care.